So we wanted to make a video about the process of making MAHANARAYANA THIALAM. MAHANARAYANA is a very important Ayurvedic formula. It's a very famous Ayurvedic herbal oil used for treating arthritis, nerve damage, paralysis, Vata conditions in general, and eye problems. It can be taken internally, orally. It can be taken in the ears for certain conditions. There are a lot of uses for this popular oil. It can be used for daily massage. It's a wonderful, wonderful oil. It's hard to find good quality Mahanarayana oil. The original recipe for Mahanarayana oil comes from the Vaishadhya Ratnavali, the text on Ayurveda, and we are making Mahanarayana according to the traditional recipe in order to teach people about these traditional methods. It's very, very difficult nowadays to find good quality Ayurvedic oils which are handmade as they were in the ancient times. And we are concerned that this mystical art and science of making the Ayurvedic medicines is getting lost. In India there are some regulations. They try to regulate the Ayurvedic products. They say that they have to be made according to the scriptures, but even in India people are cutting corners and reducing amounts of herbs. In the US there's not yet much knowledge of making the herbal formulas. And so people are making various concoctions of their own and calling it Mahanarayana. In our humble view, this should not be done. We should label things as they are, and we should learn about the proper ways to make the herbal medicines before we start labeling our products according to the ancient names. A note on substitutions. Substitutions are acceptable, and we think it's a good idea to do some substitutions. A lot of the herbs in Mahanarayana oil are rare now, and they're getting threatened due to over-harvesting in a reckless way in India. And so we do recommend substitutions, but we should bear in mind that there are 60 ingredients in Mahanarayana oil, and there's a pre-treatment process of the oil which has 11 additional ingredients. And so if we are doing substitutions, we should substitute an herb for each of these herbs in the formula so that we have the same amount of herbs, and we should substitute with knowledge of herbs so that the oil will have similar properties. If we use just 15 or 25 herbs rather than 71, we'll have a very different formula. Herbs empower each other when they work together in formulas. There's a synergy to the herbs. They get more powerful as they work together in groups. Herbs are safer if you have a larger number of herbs because you have a smaller quantity of each herb, and any potential difficulties caused by one herb will be counterbalanced by the other herbs. So substituting herbs is recommended. We've done a lot of substitution here because we don't want to stress the threatened plants there in India, and we have many wonderful substitutes that are available to us in a high quality here. We're using the traditional amounts, which is a lot of herbs. We're very concerned that this art of making the oils, herbal oils, will be lost. And so we're making this video for the benefit of the world to teach the traditional ways. And so for the first step of our oil, we'll make a decoction. And we're making half a gallon of oil. Half a gallon of oil will use a lot of herbs. For half a gallon of oil, we are using 9 pounds of herbs just for our decoction. I'll show you some of these. This is some of the herbs. This is some more of the herbs here. And then this is some more. And then we have this bag here. And we have this here. So you see it's quite a lot of herbs that we're using for just a small amount of oil. For half a gallon of oil, 9 pounds of herbs will go into the decoction, and that's just the first step. We'll also make a paste and various other herbs, which we'll show you later. We will tell you all of the ingredients, and we'll tell you how it's made. If you want more information about the pre-processing of oil, please watch our video on THIALAM Wurchana. We detail that process there. And if you want more details about cooking the oil, then watch our video on making herbal oils on Ayurvedic THIALAM. More details are there, and this is the kind of information which you can't learn from a book, but when you see us doing it in the video, it can help you to start to learn to do it at home. It's best to learn directly from a teacher, but in the absence of that, we hope that these videos will help you to be able to make similar Ayurvedic products at home. So we want to talk some about the expense of this oil. It's very, very expensive to make such an Ayurvedic oil. So for this, we're using a very large amount of herbs. The recipe calls for about 13 pounds of herbs for 1/2 gallon of oil. Herbs are somewhat cheaper in India than they are here in the US, but to get good quality organic herbs, it has cost us over $650 to buy the ingredients, just the ingredients. So this starts to give you some idea. The process has taken us over 5 days of 5 really full days, 10-hour days of labor. So if you need to pay someone for labor, there would be a considerable cost for this as well. Now, ideally, you would want someone who is trained, who's an expert in making the Ayurvedic oils, and someone with an expert training would need to be paid more. But if you just got regular labor, someone off the street who didn't know what they were doing, and you paid them minimum wage for their efforts, the minimum wage here is $7.25. And so if we had 5 days paying someone for 10 hours, $7.25, this would come to about $360. And so for 1/2 gallon of oil, the cost for making this, at the very least, for making an oil with organic ingredients, and we're also getting wholesale prices for our herbs, so it's a discounted price. Since we're a manufacturer of herbal medicines, we get a wholesale discount from the herbal companies. So to make 1/2 gallon of oil, it would cost over $1,000, meaning that it would cost over $2,000 to make this oil per gallon. And so you understand, if you want to make any profit doing this, this would be a very expensive product. Ideally, at certain points, it's easier if there are 2 people working together to make the oil. And like I said, you'd want well-trained people working on it so they don't ruin the expensive ingredients. This oil has some very expensive ingredients in it, like the saffron and camphor. But it's very, very potent, and a little bit goes a very long way. You can dilute this oil 1 part in 8 parts of base oil and use as a regular massage oil. Or if you use it just as it is, straight on the body, it will have a very potent effect. The effects of such an oil made in the traditional ways like this can't really be compared to the products usually available on the market that are a much lower quality. So it would be very expensive to make and sell this oil, but it would be very, very powerful. And so we should learn these traditional ways, and we should make these traditional products available for people so that we can pass on the knowledge of Ayurveda to future generations, so that this knowledge is not lost now. It's very important in this time in India. Things are getting more expensive, and they're starting to have to pay more for labor. And so even in India, there may be a concern that if we're not careful, these medicines could be lost. They're very powerful, and I say medicine because these formulas are very powerful, like medicine, and that's the traditional thought in India. We don't usually think of herbal things, herbal remedies in the U.S. We think of it as a dietary supplement, and legally we're supposed to speak of it as such. But for the purpose of teaching, I call this a medicine. Of course, when we sell it, we follow the laws. We tell them it's an herbal supplement. But, you know, when we're teaching about the process, we can say this is a medicine, because it is. The traditional recipe for MAHANARAYANA THIALAM makes a very large amount, about 1.5 gallons. We're making a third of that. We have a very large cooking pan here, and we can only make about half of the decoction at a time in there, because not all of the herbs will actually fit, and all of the water does not fit, so we'll have to continue to add water through the process. Because we don't have proper equipment, this part of the process will take us 2 days.
And this recipe calls for 2 different decoctions. The first one will be made with 320 grams each of bilva mula, ashwagandha, brihati, shwadhamshtra, syonaka, vatyalaka, paribhadra, kshudra, katila, atibala, agnimantha, prasarani, and patala. We are making a few substitutions here. About 7 of these herbs are in the dashamula, the traditional blend of 10 roots, and so we are substituting for 10 of these herbs those 10 roots. And ashwagandha we are using, and for bala and atibala we are making substitutions here. For bala we substituted marshmallow, which is in the same botanical family, and for the atibala we substituted comfrey root, which has similar properties. So this decoction is made using 32 liters of water, which is simmered and reduced down to 8 liters of water. This recipe also calls for the fresh pressed juice, the swarasa of shatavari root. We don't have fresh shatavari roots available to us, and so there are 2 substitutions recommended by the Shastras if you don't have the fresh herb to use for swarasa. The ideal substitution is to take 2 parts of water and to soak 1 part of herbs for 1 day and 1 night in that water, and then to strain out the water. We are using the second method, which this is used for very hard herbs that you can't press the juice out of. We're doing it in this case because we have less shatavari available to us, and so the other option is to make a decoction. Decoction is made by putting 1 part of herbs in 8 parts of water and reducing that water by 1/4 before straining out the herbs. The amount called for here would be 1/2 gallon, which is equal to the amount of sesame oil used in this recipe.
So as you can see, it's quite a lot of herbs here. It's actually a little bit difficult to stir it. It's so full in the pan. The recipe actually calls for a powder, a coarse powder of herbs. It would be a little bit more difficult to strain that way, but it would be easier for cooking.
The recipe calls for murchita sesame oil, or sesame oil which has been pre-treated through the process of murchana. And it calls also for 1/2 gallon of cow's milk and 1/2 gallon of goat milk. These are all cooked together with a kalka, a paste of herbs. This paste is prepared from different herbs, 32 grams each. Rasna, for which we have substituted guduchi. Ashwagandha, mishi or dill, devadaru, kushta. We've used just a little bit of kushta because this is a very endangered herb from the high Himalayan areas. So we've substituted galangal root for most of the kushta called for in the recipe. And so next is the 4 parnis, the parni chatu, shala parni, prishni parni, mudga parni, and masha parni. And for these we have substituted, for the shala parni we've substituted gokshura. For the prishni parni we've substituted blue kohosh. And for mudga parni we've substituted yucca root. And for masha parni we've substituted comfrey. All of the herbs in this original recipe have anti-rheumatic properties, and a lot of them are nervines, and so we have favored herbs with anti-rheumatic properties and nervine herbs as we've chosen substitutes for this oil. So the next herb, aguru, is a very rare and expensive herb for which we have substituted our native sassafras. And so then the next herb is nagakeshara and Saindav salt and jatamamsi and haridra or turmeric and daru haridra or tree turmeric. We've used a small amount of daru haridra and substituted for most of this yarrow, which has similar properties. Shaileya is a lichen, which we happen to have on hand, so we have used the shaileya. And chandan, in this case what is meant is the red chandan, rakta chandan. And pushkaramul, these roots we grew ourselves. And ela, or the small cardamom. And manjishta. And yashti madhu, or licorice root, and tagara, or Indian valerian. We've substituted the European type of valerian, which has very similar properties. And then musta, or nutgrass, and tej patra, or the Indian bay leaf, which comes from a type of cinnamon tree, and bringaraj. Bringaraj also grows wild in Virginia. We had this grown for us on a farm nearby. We started the bringaraj from seed, and they grew it for us, and we harvested this last year. And jivaka, for which we've substituted sarsaparilla, and rishabhaka, for which we substituted marshmallow. And medha is a polygonatum genus plant. So we substituted another plant in the same genus, Solomon seal. And mahameda is also a close relative of Solomon seal. And so for this we've added the false Solomon seal, also in the same botanical family. We've added a small amount of kudzu root also. For kakoli, we substituted astragalus. And for kshira kakoli, we substituted the black cohosh, which shares a lot of the nervine properties. For riddhi, we've substituted native wild yam, which we gathered. And for vriddhi, we substituted slippery elm. And for ambu, we've substituted a combination of crane's bill, the root of the native geranium, and the native wild ginger. And vacha and for palasha, we substituted parsley root. For stalnea, we've substituted a combination of myrrh and juniper. And for vrishchikali, which is punarnava, we put some birch bark. For choraka, a type of angelica, we have substituted the European species of angelica, which has been grown here. A lot of the herbs in this blend we either have grown ourselves or we have gathered from the wild and processed ourselves, so we're sure that they are very fresh, very potent, and the pranas of these herbs are connected to the land here where we live, so it connects us to the nature here where we live. This is a great way to make herbal medicines when you can bring some of the ingredients from the garden and from the forest around and put them into the healing medicines. The properties are incomparable. So after 2 days of cooking, about 8 hours each day, we have our decoctions finished. You see the dark liquid here, and so we will strain these, and we'll be ready in the morning to begin cooking our THIALAM. So to cook the THIALAM, we combine our ingredients in a large clean pan. First we add 1/2 gallon of murchita THIALAM, that is pre-treated sesame oil, and we will heat that slightly before adding our other ingredients. Then we combine all of our powdered herbs in a large bowl and make a kalka or paste by adding water. So here is the finished kalka. We've used about 1 gallon of water. This is a large amount of powdered herbs. And adding the water will keep the herbs from clumping together in the cooking oil. Now that the oil has heated slightly, we'll go ahead and add this paste to the oil. And to this we add our decoction of 13 herbs. This we will add only part at a time because the pan is not large enough to accommodate the whole quantity. So as liquid evaporates, we will continue to add more liquids. Then we add our shatavari decoction. We've heated this decoction of shatavari so that it won't slow down the cooking process too much here.
In total, the cooking of this oil is taking about 10 hours, it looks like, to cook all of the ingredients into the oil. Again, those ingredients are a half a gallon of oil, 2 gallons of our decoction of herbs, 1/2 gallon of the shatavari decoction, 1/2 gallon of milk, cow's milk, and 1/2 gallon of goat's milk. And you'll cook those all in the oil until all of the liquid has evaporated. And then the solid and the paste of herbs as well is in there. And the paste of the powdered herbs will be then thick, and it will be strained out of the finished oil. And then just the gandha dravyas, the substances for scenting the oil, will be added then at the end as a final step. So here is the beautiful THIALAM cooking, and it smells wonderful. This will be a very potent herbal oil. We add 1/2 gallon of cow's milk. Then we're adding the goat's milk to this pan to preheat it before adding to the THIALAM. And so 1/2 a gallon of fresh goat's milk. So we're preparing to strain the THIALAM now. As you see, we cooked our THIALAM to a katapaka consistency. This is the hard cooked process, and you see the paste of the herbs here forms a hard mass there. And so we're setting up this bowl to strain our THIALAM into, and we've got a strainer here and some cotton cloth to catch that, and we will add our bowl of gandha dravyas, which these are not cooked along with the THIALAM because they may lose some of their scent. The volatile oils can get lost during the cooking process, and so this is coarsely powdered and added to the strained oil, in which it will allow that to steep for 1 day and 1 night before straining again and bottling. So here is a little bit of the finished THIALAM. It's very, very fragrant. It has a dark color. It's very potent.